Welcome to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast where we explore public sector leadership journeys. From honest chats about career highs and lows, to lessons and wisdom to inspire the next generation of leaders that will shape our society.
Hello and welcome to the Morgan Hunt Inspiring Working Lives podcast. Today's guest is Mark Smith, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of ADA, the National College of Digital Skills, a specialist further education college focused on preparing young people for careers in technology. Mark began his career as part of the inaugural Teach First cohort in 2003, teaching in schools serving disadvantaged communities. This experience gave him first-hand insight into the challenges facing young people and the gap between education and the skills demanded by modern employers. After teaching, Mark worked with Lloyds Banking Group in the UK and South Africa before returning to the education and social impact sector. He later completed a master's degree in education at Harvard University and worked with the Future Leaders Trust, supporting the development of school leadership across the UK. Inspired by his classroom experience and exposure to industry, Mark co-founded ADA, the National College of Digital Skills, with Tom Fogden. Established in 2016, ADA was the first new further education college in England for more than 20 years and was created to address the UK's digital skills gap through employer-designed apprenticeships and industry partnerships. Under Mark's leadership, ADA has grown into a nationally recognised institution with campuses in London and Manchester, delivering programmes in software, engineering, data analytics and cybersecurity, and helping young people from all backgrounds access careers in the digital economy. Mark, thank you so much for coming into Morgan Hunt today to meet with us. I'd like to start off by asking you about your childhood. How was it, and did you have career aspirations at an early age?
First of all, thanks very much for inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here. My childhood, I had fantastic parents. I was raised in a very supportive household as an only child. I have predominantly fond memories of growing up, for sure. Did I have early career aspirations? Not particularly. I can distinctly remember when I was, I think, 11 or 12 years old, no, maybe a bit older, 14 or so, sitting in a room at home, and my mum was just telling me about my granddad's business, which was a carpet cleaning business, actually. She was saying about how it had some challenges but also some opportunities, and I remember going and sitting by myself and basically writing, sort of sketching out what I think in hindsight would have been a business plan, essentially, for how he could double his revenue and grow the company. It's something I didn't think about for many years, but I can remember now clearly sitting down and writing that, and thinking about how many people you would need to hire in order to be able to increase your revenue and those sorts of things. So I wonder if that was my first steps in terms of being an entrepreneur and thinking about how to build organisations.
That's wonderful. So that just came from nowhere. Your mother started talking about it, and you thought, "Gosh."
I think those were the circumstances. I can definitely remember sitting down and writing, because I can remember writing £100,000 of revenue and then getting to like £1 million worth of revenue. And I always remember the reason I think I thought about it was because I wrote the business plan for ADA, and I raised £100,000 that was like the first philanthropic donation to get the college off the ground. So that was the amount of money I had to play, or Tom and I had to play with in the first year in order to be able to kind of get it off the ground. So as well as pay ourselves a salary. So it certainly reminded me of that activity I did when I was 14.
Connection down the years. Yeah. Wow. Okay, that's amazing. And from school, where did you go next? Where did your sort of education lead you initially?
I got 2 A's and a C at A level, and if I got 2 A's and a B, so I was 1% off getting a B in my English language A levels, and I got a C. So I didn't go to Oxford and study law, which I think probably in hindsight was the best thing that ever happened to me. So I took a gap year, did the fairly normal thing, worked in a bar for a while, earned some money, went travelling, and really enjoyed that, and let off some steam. And then I came back, went to Warwick. I always say pithily, I did a full-time degree in rugby and a part-time degree in history. And really enjoyed that as well, and did work hard on occasion. Really enjoyed leading my rugby club in my final year, which is kind of, I guess, the first proper leadership role I'd had as well. And not sure I did a great job of it, but anyway, got through it. And then just came to the end of university and was just, I didn't sort of, I wanted a good start to my career, but at the same time I very much felt like I really wanted to help people and to give back, and to I guess try and make a difference, I suppose. And Teach First came along. I found out about it reading. I probably shouldn't say this on reading the newspaper on the toilet at a friend's when I was visiting a friend's university, and then went back and applied, and then went to the assessment centre and ended up being part of the first Teach First cohort in 2003, and that was pretty transformative, I would say.
So Teach First was a sort of big initiative from the Blair government in terms of, look, how can we enhance schools, particularly in difficult areas where times were hard and such, and how could we inspire the pupils? Is that right?
Yeah, very much. The idea back in 2003 was you kind of did 2 years, and then while keeping your options open to see what other careers you might want to pursue longer term. I think that's evolved a bit now into it's a bit more of a more standard teacher training program, though still with real aspirations for kind of attracting the very best into the teaching profession, which in the age of AI I think is going to be an important thing. I was parachuted into Bethnal Green Technology College, not too far from here actually.
Exactly.
Just around the corner, which at the time was a very challenging school. It's now a fantastic school, but back in 2003 it had its real challenges, and it was a very eye-opening couple of years for me. At the time it wasn't, unfortunately, a terribly well-led school, and actually fell into Ofsted inadequate and was closed down quite shortly after I left. It was a real eye-opener for me, and just made me realise how much talent there was in society in general that was just unfortunately not really realising, getting the opportunity to realise and come to fruition, and that sort of sparked a desire to do something about that longer term. And I went to work at Lloyds Banking Group on their graduate scheme after my 2 years of teaching, and I hoovered up a whole host of business skills there, but I couldn't quite shake that sort of, I guess, that passion, I suppose, at the end of the day for trying to help young people from more disadvantaged backgrounds realise their potential, and ultimately that's flowed through to setting up Ada.
Okay, so that first day when you turned up in that college, did you go, oh my goodness, this is slightly more real than I was expecting it to be? Or
so Bethnal Green back then was a different place, and it's just at the top of Brick Lane actually, the school. So Brick Lane was a very different place as well in 2003, and so I walked. I was living in Shadwell, and I walked up along Brick Lane very early in the morning, not wanting to be late on my first day, and I can remember it being really quite an eye opener, and being quite scared to go. As I guess you are with any job on your first day, but just really quite nervous, and having to stand in front of a class full of students after what is really just 6 weeks of initial teacher training was certainly a pretty intimidating experience. Some of my early efforts in teaching were very enthusiastic, but possibly in hindsight a little bit naive. I think I was playing Bob Marley in my first year 9 history lesson, it just, as you can well expect, it turned into a very lively lesson, should we say?
Right, yeah. sometimes they're the best. Okay, right. So then you do the 2 years in teaching, and then Lloyds Bank comes calling. So that's a very different environment for you.
Yeah, I think of my school, so it's very interesting. There's 170 of us in that first Teach First cohort, very entrepreneurial cohort. Like the number of people that have gone on to found charities and education-related organisations is staggering, to be honest. Out of that cohort, so it's probably the best network I've ever been involved in. And my flatmate who I was living with was in a fantastic school down the road and carried on teaching after I left. But I just, it was a really challenging school that I was in, and it wasn't particularly well led, unfortunately. And it meant that after 2 years, I just felt a bit burnt out. I thought I'd go and explore, I guess, what would be a quite different world in terms of Lloyds Banking Group. And I was hungry to hoover up, more general business skills as well. And so, I was on their graduate program, group management training program for 2 years, and did a number of sort of placements in different teams, retail banking strategy, helped launch mobile banking for the first time, just as smartphones were coming in. God, that sort of dates you, doesn't it? But, and the early contactless pilots over in Canary Wharf as well, before contactless was a thing, really. So that was really enjoyable. Went to South Africa and worked in offshore banking down there for 6 months or so, which was also very enjoyable. Really loved South Africa as a country, and then did a lot of business case modelling, PowerPoint slide decks, strategy presentations, sort of the things I learned how to build business models more than anything else, I would say, and that sort of equipped me quite well further down the line.
Okay, so that's quite a pivotal time really in sort of recent technology, isn't it? That switch to mobile banking, which we all kind of bank through our phones now, don't we?
Yeah, so back then it was just before smartphones came in, and it was about how you basically use text messages to transfer money, which just feels very old-fashioned now, really, more than anything else. But so really that's where I kind of had my first significant contact with technology project management and the role that technology was going to play in our lives, and how you can improve customer experience, working on that. And it was really interesting and fascinating working at a bank that is reasonably traditional and had been around for a long time, and was suddenly having to deal with what was some pretty seismic technology changes that were coming down the line, and that it knew it needed to get to grips with, but wasn't probably terribly well placed to take advantage of compared to some of the sort of challenger banks that were just starting to come through at that point. So it was a really interesting couple of years, and again working down in South Africa was also really eye-opening, in Johannesburg, really eye-opening experience, and I also had the opportunity during that time. I took a month or so off as well as leave, and helped set up a school in Uganda as well, working in Kampala as well. So it was just a really interesting time in sort of mid-20s to kind of explore different avenues.
Yes, wow. Okay, so there's always that sort of calling to improve society and to help out and young people and how they can be developed positively, even in the middle of that Lloyds Bank.
Yeah, I guess so. Very much so. Was doing some mentoring at that point, just trying to help young people who were had business ideas and trying to help them kind of hone those business ideas. So I guess running through it is a theme of kind of helping people get things off the ground and helping particularly those from more disadvantaged backgrounds.
And then education calls again for you?
Yeah, so I was at the Teach First alumni conference basically, and just got chatting to the CEO of Teach First, Brett Wigdorts, and he mentioned they just got a grant from the government to do more around the kind of Teach First alumni community, and was I interested in coming on board. And I'd be working very closely with a gentleman called Lord Andrew Adonis, who's the kind of was then the education or schools minister, and then became the education secretary and I went and had a conversation with him, and he, again, as you said, Teach First at that point was really the darling of the Labour administration, so there was a lot of opportunity there, and so went back to Teach First and headed up those schemes and the expansion of the alumni programme at Teach First, and how those alumni could be used to go back into schools and work with particularly gifted and talented students, but more generally around kind of careers advice and guidance, and back then it was all about how to get more young people to university, that sort of 50% to university target that was Blair's mantra, particularly in the final years, and kind of how Teach First could contribute to that. And then at the same time, it was really interesting, it was also the time that Teach First got a significant expansion grant from the Blair administration to kind of I think treble its numbers and go to new regions. It had primarily been London based to begin with, and it to expand up to Manchester and then go on to elsewhere as well. So I was there working at Teach First at a very interesting time where an organisation gets given what was a pretty sizable expansion grant, and how it dealt with that really, and went suddenly from kind of 40-50 people to like 250 within about 2 years, something like that. And it was a really interesting time being part of the kind of wider leadership team of Teach First and seeing that growth, and a really exciting time as well. And Teach First is a fantastic charity, and it was great to be part of that wider leadership team, kind of helping really establish it as a national institution.
Right, okay, yes, okay. And then at some point Harvard appears.
So I think it was 2 or 3 years back at Teach First, working for the charity, and then I sort of felt like I kind of bluntly learned as much as I was going to from the role, and was starting to think about my next opportunity, and I was a little stuck, if I was honest. At that point I didn't quite know what was next, what was the right thing to do. I started thinking about how to tie together what felt like quite a disparate bunch of experiences, teaching and then working at a bank, and then heading up a kind of widening participation programme using Teach First alumni, and by that point I was sitting on ministerial advisory boards and things, but I wasn't, I was only in my late 20s, so I wasn't quite probably ready for senior management roles just yet. I certainly didn't think I was, and so I started looking around for a course that would sort of bring all of that learning together, and slightly sadly really I couldn't find a course that would allow me to kind of study business, education, business and policy in one programme in England, or in the UK actually in total, and that sort of interdisciplinary study is not something that universities in England do terribly well. I don't think, maybe that's changed a bit now, but whereas there's a programme at Harvard, essentially it's called the Special Studies pathway of their education master's programme, where you can essentially you have to do half your courses at the education school, and then the rest you can do at any of the schools at Harvard, as long as you have to articulate why you want to study the programs that the modules that you want to study, and how they kind of all fit together, and if you can articulate that, then off you go, and you have to go and register at all the Harvard Business School and the Kennedy School of Government, and then obviously at the education school as well, and so I sort of was a bit of a nomad really, but it was really interesting, very very different cultures. Harvard Business School is just a very different culture to the education school at Harvard, and again very different to the kind of public policy School of Government as well. So very very different environments, but it was a really interesting year, studying predominantly education, but some business courses as well, some non-profit management courses, some finance courses, and sort of some really interesting policy courses, and particularly one called Sparking Social Change at the Kennedy School, which was just fascinating, learning about how you create social change really, and bring that about, and it was a really interesting year for me, quite lonely. I think I was the only British person out of 600 master's students, predominantly American, obviously, but then and I was a bit older as well. Most of them were kind of mid-20s, and I was just turning 30 when I was over there. So, and I made the slightly naive decision to go back and stay in halls of residence as well. So I was I was quite lonely actually while I was over there. It was quite a challenging year for me in a variety of different ways, but I certainly learned a lot.
And you got through it. Yeah.
I got through it. Yes.
Yeah. Wow, and what a thing to say. Been to Harvard, and
not something everybody gets to do. I got a lot of stick from it from my friends taking the piss out of me for it as well.
Really?
But yeah, it was. It's certainly an interesting place, and the facilities are amazing, and they have a superstore. They have a department store at the university that is just full of merchandise. Like literally, you can buy everything with a Harvard logo on it, and but it's like a full-on 3-story department store. It's a very interesting year.
Probably makes a fortune as well.
Yeah, I would imagine they do. Very very interesting year. But also made me really think about, it wasn't cheap. I was lucky enough to get on the property ladder. But I had to sell my flat in order to be able to cover my tuition fees over there, and it wasn't cheap. And I think in hindsight, I probably did get value for money out of it. But a lot of the time when I was over there, I was questioning whether I was getting value for money, and it sort of really started me thinking about the sort of value proposition of university in general. And I think I certainly brought that back with me to England after the Masters, and it was one of the things that sort of was informing my thinking when I came up with the idea for ADA.
Okay, right, so the idea for ADA, there's not been a college established in 20 years, and suddenly you come up with this idea. How did that happen?
There are a number of different things came together really. So I came back from the States, and I think the first thing to say is I had quite a hard time when I came back from the States personally. I didn't really know what I wanted to do next, so I sort of left for America and wasn't particularly sure what I wanted to do, but thinking, I've got a year in America studying my Masters, I'll work out what I want to do next. I came back and I still didn't really know what I wanted to do, I was bluntly, I was a little bit depressed for a while, not in the best place, and then I just started to one of the really good things that happened was I started mentoring a young man, Matthew, weirdly on the program that I'd set up at Teach First before I went to America, but so back just as a volunteer back on that program I started mentoring him, and he grew up in South London, in a very humble background, came from a very humble background, was desperate to become a software developer, but was ultimately failing his computer science A-level because he knew more than his teacher did. So working with Matthew sort of opened my eyes really to how poor the quality of sort of digital education is in many schools and colleges and some universities as well, because particularly computer science is quite a specialist subject. It's very hard to recruit the teaching talent, a lot of vacancies, a lot of people who aren't haven't studied computer science are teaching it as a second subject and things like that. So often the teaching can be quite mixed quality, and as it particularly was for Matthew. But also then talking to him, he was just dead set. He was like, if I become a software developer, I can earn more than £30,000, and that, he just was adamant that would be transformative for him, and it could support his mum and do all these different things. And it sort of started talking to him, really opened my eyes, and I started paying attention to this. And then I went to a session with Nesta, and I heard there's 100,000 vacancies in the tech sector, and only 3,750 students in the entire of England studied computer science A-level in 2013. And I was like, wow, that's just a massive supply and demand mismatch really, in terms of what's been studied in school and taught in schools and colleges, and what industry really needs in terms of its tech talent. And then I sort of put it all together, and then I was like, well, then I was working with Andrew Adonis on. He was writing a book called Education, and sort of I ended up being proofreading bits of that for him, and sort of he sort of made me realise the FE sector was going to increasingly come under the spotlight in terms of reform, and actually the beauty of an FE college is you can, it's the only type of education institution in England where you really can bridge the kind of education to employment divide. If you're in a school, you go up to 18 and then it stops, and they or if you're a university, you pick them up at 18 and go from there, whereas an FE college can go from 16 years old or even 14 years old all the way through, if you wanted to master's level education. And I really wanted, I believe passionately that I wanted to set up something that would support young people from 16 years old all the way through to a good quality entry level job, and be able to support them all the way along that journey. And ultimately the FE college model is the only one that really allows that. And so I sat down one weekend and I just put it all together and said, well, could we set up a specialist technical college, focusing on recruiting as many young people from disadvantaged backgrounds as possible to kind of harness tech as a tool for positive social mobility, make our specialism around tech, get as many young people into good quality entry level tech jobs as possible, and kind of help meet that 100,000 vacancy in the tech sector. And so I put all of that together into a business plan one weekend, and then you hit the pavements and start pitching it to as many people as you can. I was lucky to find eventually, through the Teach First network that I mentioned at the start, being part of that 2003 cohort, one of the people I learned to teach with introduced me to this tech entrepreneur, Robin Toombs, and then he had an initial went and had a beer with him really actually in a pub in Piccadilly, and then he was like, come and meet my co-founder as well, as a guy called Noel Hayden, and went and pitched it to the two of them a bit more formally second time around, with a sense of humour they emailed me at 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve 2013, and said you can have £100,000. We'll give you £100,000 to try and take the venture forward. But they put some caveats in place. So they gave us, I think it was 25 to begin with, and the other 75 was reliant on us becoming a registered charity. So we had 25k to begin with, until we became a registered charity.
This episode is brought to you by Morgan Hunt, a public sector recruitment agency with over 30 years of experience. Whether you're looking for your next role or growing your team, we match purpose-driven people with organisations making a real difference. Visit morganhunt.com to find out how Morgan Hunt inspires working lives.
Okay, so you get the offer, 5 o'clock Christmas Eve. What happened on Christmas Day?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't remember what happened. Certainly I was happy. I wasn't loving, if I'm honest, I wasn't loving the job I was in at the time, so I won't go into that in too much detail, but I think it's probably relief more than anything else. I put so much into it, and I kind of knew I was getting positive vibes from various different people, so I was kind of knew I thought I was onto something, but obviously it's not, it's a charity, so no one's going to get, they're not going to get a return on their investment. They never have, or a financial one at least. Hopefully they've got a social return on investment, but not a financial one. So it's quite an unusual thing to find, to people who are willing to make that, upfront donation for something that was, essentially just a PowerPoint deck at the time. Very much quickly in the new year, I bumped back into Tom. Actually, that was just before I got the confirmation of the funding. We actually went to a 10-year reunion of the first cohort of Teach First teachers. So it was on the way to that 10-year reunion in 2013, having started teaching in 2003, that I bumped into Tom, so I learned to teach with Tom, and he was working at Deloitte at the time, and he. I said, look, I've got this idea. I think I'm about to raise this money. What do you think? And so he got quite excited, and then we went to the pub. There's a bit of a recurring theme. We talked about it a number of times, and then eventually the money came through, and then we got back together in the new year, and I was like, I'm going to quit my job and do this, and he was like, okay, I'll come on board too. So that was it, and I think I started mid-February, and then he was on board from the beginning of March, something like that. That was beginning of 2014, and then I think the big challenge was we had enough money to pay ourselves for a couple of months, but because it actually took longer to become a registered charity than we had expected. So there was about 2.5 months where we just worked unpaid, knowing that once we got that charity registration, we would unlock. But yeah, that was quite a lean time, I would say, for sure. We went out to Estonia. It's all a bit fuzzy back in those days. We went out to Estonia to see an IT college in Estonia that we'd heard about, and sort of see if we could learn a bit from them. So that was really interesting. And then we were very lucky. We got introduced to two civil servants who were writing the kind of brief for this for the National Colleges policy at the time, under would have been Matthew Hancock, who was the skills minister underneath Vince Cable, who was the Secretary of State for Department for Business. Business industry and strategy. I don't know. Very long under the coalition government. So so we sent them our presentation and said this is what we want to do. And if I'm honest with you, a lot of that presentation appeared in the National College's what was called a call for engagement. We got very lucky in terms of timing, this National Colleges policy came out. They wanted to open new colleges. I don't think they had any idea how hard what the implications of opening a new FE college, because no one had done it for so long. It became the perfect policy for us to kind of incubate ourselves, really. And the first year was, a lot of it was, the feedback from government was just like, how are you credible? Why are you credible? Like, you're just two guys with a PowerPoint presentation, and how do you need industry behind you? So a lot of the first year was just trying to get the kind of coalition of supporters that we needed to be credible. So first and foremost, we went and sort of incubated ourselves within something called the Aldridge Foundation, which was set up by Sir Rod Aldridge, who was the founder of Capita. So he had some pretty swanky offices on Piccadilly, in a very weird set of coincidences, in the same building as the two guys who'd given us the £100,000. So literally, as we were coming out of a meeting, I was like, we were coming down the stairs and meeting those two guys, and we were Robin and Noel, and then I was like, the Aldridge Foundation, they're an education charity, let's see if they want to give us some desk space. And we literally knocked on the door and went and had a chat, and ended up they gave a desk space for 18 months and access to some of their resources and expertise, which was really helpful. And frankly, being right by Piccadilly Circus was just great in terms of industry meetings and things like that. So I don't think we'll ever get better office space than that. So that was us. And then there was just a lot of trying to get industry supporters on board. We ended up with Deloitte, Bank of America, Gamesys, IBM and King Games, the Candy Crush people, as our kind of founding support, and the Aldridge Foundation as our sort of founding supporters, and then got introduced to Number 10, to a guy called Dan Korski, who was Cameron's innovation advisor at the time. Sort of had a bit of time at Number 10. They hosted a couple of round tables for us as well, so that was really fun. And then ultimately we wrote the much more detailed business plan for the college, and ultimately David Cameron announced it December 2015. So it sort of took 18 months or so really to get that coalition of support, get the approval from government, and then that sort of unlocked sort of revenue to get the college off the ground, sort of operating funding, I suppose, matched by some philanthropy, donations from Deloitte and Bank of America and others, and some pro bono donations as well, secondments, things like that, and then ultimately, some revenue funding from government and capital funding as well. Maybe we'll go on and talk about premises in a bit.
We will, yeah. But so that's fascinating. It always seems to be Christmas time. You get these great announcements.
Yeah, it was December. I've sort of given. I mean, that period was just. I mean, it was crazy. We were working 80 plus hour weeks, 100-hour weeks sometimes. Like there's so much. It just took so much effort to get it, convince people really, and get it over the line. Like partly the government is not particularly good at doing things it doesn't have a pre-defined process for. Most of the other national colleges that were set up were kind of subsidiaries of existing entities, whereas we were just coming from nothing really. We had no financial track record, and nothing at all. It certainly, there were a number of points where it looked like it was just going to collapse. We had to, you just had to persevere and hang in there, and eventually, we just number 10 coming on, so being introduced to number 10 saying, yeah, this is a good idea, we should do this. That kind of at that point I was like, I think this is going to get off the ground at this point. But it took a long time, and the challenge of it taking a long time was then they were like, okay, we want to open by September 2016. So they announced it in December 2015, and we were like, well, so we got 7 months to open a college. We didn't even have a building at that point. It was the start of 2016 was pretty punchy as well.
But not only are you trying to sell this idea, this is what we should do, and government's going, well, we've not done it before, we don't know how this is all going to work, but you're running up against austerity during this time as well, aren't you? So it's not like there's masses of funding out there for...
No, and we've always been, the National College called for engagement initially, said, national colleges needed to be 50-50 funded by industry and by government. I think that was possibly a bit naive, but we have always had industry funding from the get-go. It's always been around 10% of our operating budget, a bit more in the early days, but we've always supplemented our sort of what I think of as earned income from government revenue streams, per learner income with philanthropy income, and it's always allowed us to deliver a bit above and beyond for our learners, which is hopefully leads through to the great outcomes that we get, but also build the capacity to be able to continue to grow.
Okay, so if you look at your life in reverse, as we've just done, it seems like it's all heading to this moment, from writing the business plan for the carpet cleaning through to your education experiences, what happened at university and further education you did at Harvard, and also the Lloyds Bank stuff. And then suddenly you'll find yourself here at this moment where you're going to take this college off the ground and build it for the first time. But I guess you're going to need a campus.
Yes, very much going to need a campus, and more importantly, going to need some learners as well.
Good point.
It was. We had a bit more funding by this point, so we went out and we could recruit a small team. We got a capital project manager, and a lady, Holly, who came in and helped with the marketing, and we had a secondee from Deloitte who was helping us sort of in many different ways, really. But still a very small team. We must, God knows how many sites we went to visit to see about potential campus locations. So the Barbican, I think. I'm trying to think of the other ones. Places over down in Croydon, over in East Ham, I think. And ultimately went up to Haringey and to Tottenham, and bumped into a counsellor there called Joe Goldberg, who in another one of these weird roundabout things. Actually, no, it was actually he'd worked with us on our initial branding for the college. Like we realised we needed a logo and a brand and all of that, and we'd been introduced to him, and then he was like, "Oh, I'm a counsellor up in Haringey. Why don't you come and have a look around?" God, I haven't thought about some of this stuff for years, and come and have a look around, and so we were like, okay. So we went up, and then all of a sudden we didn't realise he gave us he'd read that we'd had our announcement from David Cameron, and he gave us the big sell, hired a car for us and drove us all around Haringey and was like, you could have a campus here and you could have a campus here or here, and ultimately we ended up in Tottenham Hale, right by the train station on the Victoria line, and we were like, well, this would be a great location, so we ended up in a converted job centre to begin with, on a little business park, about 5 minutes walk from Tottenham Hale Station. Wasn't much from the outside, but very cool on the inside. We worked with some great architects called S02, who did a really good refurb of the place. And ultimately the building company were great as well. In 19 weeks they did it was derelict office space that was squatted through to a functioning campus. So so that was certainly interesting. I'd never done anything like that before. And I must admit that the building side of running an FE college is something I completely underestimated. It's just it's complicated, it's cutthroat. There's a lot of people who want to take your money, frankly. I think I was a bit naive probably about that side of things, but Tom was stronger on that side of things, fortunately, and we had, by that point we had a board of governors who were able to help as well, but it was still tough. So we opened. We were only ever supposed to be in this small converted job centre for a couple of years, while the bigger campus was. We had £31 million of capital funding from the GLA and from the DFE that we'd gone, and that's Boris, when he was still Mayor of London, had overruled his capital advisory board in order to sign off quite a lot of capital funding for us. I'd had to fly back from. My wife's from New Zealand. I'd gone to New Zealand to meet my wife's family for the first time, and I had to fly back early from there so that I could come and pitch to Boris and this panel about we could have more capital funding. But so we got it, and ultimately we were going to build this big new campus right by Tottenham Hale Station, and it was going to be part of the regeneration of Tottenham Hale, which we were so excited about and so passionate about, and we really we pinned all our hopes on it, and we went hell for leather for 2 or 3 years to try and make it happen, but it was just so hard, I won't name names, but the landowner and the building company, the building contractor that we were trying to work with, the construction company that we were trying to work with, were just so mercenary. In the end, they sort of saw the government money in the pot of gold, and they were just like, let's jack the prices up as much as we can. And in the end, rightly so, the government just said, we can't justify this. But there was, definitely some money wasted, I think, unfortunately, and I still feel bad about that now. But I think ultimately it just couldn't make it work. Our job centre in Tottenham Hale, we was there for 7 years. We were in the end, all through the pandemic and everything. We needed extra space, so we took on some additional space down in Whitechapel, which was a sort of converted primary school down in Whitechapel, to train our apprentices. So we were training Google and Meta and Deloitte's apprentices in what was a converted primary school down in Whitechapel, which was, we were sort of selling them the dream of this new campus, but the new campus increasingly didn't materialise, and yet we had these massive global companies training their apprentices with us in what was, barely fit for purpose circumstances, if I'm honest. So it was all getting quite challenging from that point of view, and then and then overnight the pandemic happened, buildings were no longer important. we went into the pandemic having launched our apprenticeship programs in 2017 on the day the levy came in, and done very well in the early years with those apprenticeships. Going into the pandemic was really tough, and obviously the volumes fell off a cliff as well. The demand for entry-level tech talent during the pandemic was virtually non-existent. So it was a particularly challenging time. And at that point, the DfE were like, well, if you can't find yourself a long-term home, in terms of a campus, we're not sure that capital funding is going to be there for much longer. And then
So it keeps falling back on you to sort this out, doesn't it?
They started charging us rent on so the building we were in Tottenham we never owned it. It was only ever rented. So they started charging us rent as well during the pandemic, which really ate into our reserves as well. So it was fortunately we'd had a windfall donation that sort of allowed us to ride it out. But it all got a little bit hairy. During the pandemic. Despite that, we made the very bold decision in the midst of the pandemic to expand to Manchester. There was definite ups and downs, and while we were desperately trying to find a home in London, again, a couple of tech entrepreneurs who'd done very well for themselves, Jason Stockwood, who's now the Minister for Investment, and Chris Slater, had just sold their business called Simply Business, which is a business insurance company, and done quite well for themselves, I think. And they really liked the idea for Ada, and they were like, let us give you a bit of money and open our black books and see if we can get it off the ground up in Manchester. So we, in the midst of the pandemic, I'm still. We had a new board chair as well, Tiff, who just started. It was her first meeting, poor lady, and I was like, we got to do this. We got to go to Manchester. There's enough money on the table from Jason and Chris, and also from Manchester City Council and DCMS to de-risk this. Like we can do this. Put someone on the ground up there. See if we can make this work. And we got some pro bono training space as well up there for free to begin with as well. So I was like, we can do this, even though things in London are pretty tough right now. Like, we should do this. It's not going to come along again. I had to ram that one through a little bit with my board of governors. But they did. To be fair, they after the right amount of scrutiny, they said, let's do it. And so really grateful that we did. Manchester's thriving now, so.
And it's an amazing city, Manchester, as well.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, brilliant. But then the London premises comes up.
Yeah, so just when we were really starting to, they'd made us pay rent for 2 years, so that had eaten up almost all of our financial reserves at that point, it was all looking a bit bleak. And then all of a sudden, we got a phone call one day, and they were like, "There's this, failing University Technical College in Pimlico. We think it's going to close down. Would you be interested in that building?" I think I pretty much put the phone down and got on a tube straight down to Victoria and went to see the outside of the building at least. And we managed to get to the top of the queue, straight away, and we're able to get hold of that, confirm it and get hold of that building pretty quick. So it was already a school, had been set up as an engineering college, so it had a lot of big heavy equipment in it and things, which wasn't really what we were all about. But we certainly felt it was, with using some of the money, and in the end we actually returned a huge amount of the money to the GLA and to the DfE. But using some of that money, we were able to take that building and refurbish it, and it's now our flagship Pimlico campus, and it's fantastic.
And it looks like it was built for you. It is an amazing building, and it's in a pivotal part of London with great views. It's fantastic. I think we had a great capital project manager. She'd been with us for 5 years or so she'd seen all the pain of trying to make the Tottenham campus work, and she's an incredibly resilient lady, Sophie, and
if more than anything, I was just happy for her because I think she'd sweated blood. What's the phrase? Blood, sweat, and tears to find us our permanent home, and she was able to project manage that one through to delivery and did a fantastic job, and very much kind of treads that line as we wanted it to, between kind of feeling a bit like an office space and a bit like a workspace, and also still feeling like a college as well. So it's a fantastic place to go to work every day.
So many people who sit in that chair and answer my questions, they're dealing with very challenging circumstances. They're running big organisations with loads of issues and problems, and top of the list is often finance in terms of how they keep going. But you're not only doing that, you've had to build the thing on the way. So it's quite a special thing that's happened here. How do you cope with those very different challenges as they keep coming at you through this whole sort of genesis story of Ada?
I wouldn't say I have a particular strategy. I think I think there's been definite stages. In terms of Ada's development. The early days were very entrepreneurial, very just do whatever it takes, and then there was a sort of second stage where it was okay. This is we've got some funding now, and ultimately we found some learners to enrol, and it's like the ball started to roll, and then it's then it's very much it becomes about how do you get as many people coming into your campuses and coming and learning about you as possible, becomes that period is very much about sort of, in my head, was about sales more than anything else. Like how do you just sell the proposition as well as possible. And then now it's as it starts to mature as an organisation, I guess it's become a different strategy becomes more important, and financial management, cash flow management, risk management, bluntly, become the things that are slightly more grown-up organisations can focus on. So and also talent management as well, which I'd say is probably right at the heart of all of it. It's been different hats at different times, I would say. At the end of the day, it was I think it's just an unshakable belief that it was a really good idea, and I think there was only ever one or two people who's ever told me they thought it was a bad idea. Very few people. Most businesses or ventures, in general, there's people who think it's a good idea, people who don't, but hardly anyone's ever said this is not a good idea. The challenge has been, navigating a very uncertain path in order to get to where we've gotten to. I guess it's in some. I mean, you look back and it's very enjoyable. I think I'm not actually very good with dealing with. Well, I've become very good at dealing with stress, I think, over the years, but I'm not actually the best at it. Tom's much calmer than me, and kind of he sort of rolls with the punches a bit more. I'm a bit more kind of up and down, I would think. But I wouldn't say I wear it lightly necessarily. But it has been a lot of fun at times, as well as very challenging as well, and ultimately. It's like any organisation. It's the people you work with, and we've been lucky to have some absolutely just fantastic staff, some of whom have been there for a decade or more now, and seen that journey from start to where we are now. So it's been fantastic working with them all through this period.
Brilliant. And in terms of students, and is it 350?
Just under 600 now on roll.
Right.
We've got fantastic sixth form. So started off with 59 students in Tottenham. I wasn't even in Tottenham to begin with, actually, because the building wasn't ready. So for the first 3 weeks, I think we were in Stratford, in Here East, in basically a giant warehouse. So I still look back on those 59 students and think about the risk that they took to come to Ada, and I'm very eternally grateful for them, and a large number of whom we're still in touch with on a regular basis. One who now works for us in our apprenticeship lecturing team as well, is a fantastic software developer, Dan, and that's been a really great full circle moment, having one of your students, hiring one of your students back on the staff team. So that was very cool. Now good, fast growing sixth form, and on the apprenticeship side, it's grown year on year. Up in Manchester, we started working with PwC a few years ago. That was a fantastic partnership up in Manchester, and the campus has opened up in Manchester as well now, in central Manchester. So that's been great, having that kind of multi-region feel. Obviously, apprenticeship's a bit challenging at the moment in the tech space. Entry-level hiring is definitely down, which is proving challenging, and we're having to respond to and think about how we change our programs and meet employers' needs. I guess the beauty of apprenticeships is you really are meeting employers' needs very directly. They don't have to hire those apprentices, so you've got to come up with programs that are really responsive to what they need. And right now it's AI and automation. We've got a new program launching next week on AI and automation, level 4. If anyone wants to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you. And I think in a year or so's time, we'll probably start to offer sort of compressed degree programs as well, with a big focus on value for money and employability as well. So I think the colleges, we're going through a period of real change with AI, and I think as a National College for Digital Skills, we believe really strongly we need to be making sure that we're changing with the changing based on what employers need, but also what young people say they want and need as well. And I think as we were talking about just now, with tuition fees being what they are, a lot of young people are questioning the sort of value proposition of a traditional university degree. So we think there's something really exciting that we can offer there that's maybe a little bit different and better value for money for young people as well. So, but it's exciting to have got the college to a point where we can start to, think about doing different things, and how we can, introduce new programs and flex our current programs. It's been, for so long it was about finding a home, finding a permanent home, and then getting the finances to a point where we could keep the lights on, and it feels a good moment to have gotten to that point, albeit it is quite challenging at the moment with the way things are in the tech hiring market.
Yes, okay. And am I right in saying that you've been called into government again to advise around AI?
Yes, yeah. So was delighted. I sort of randomly saw Government Digital Service had a kind of call out for people to join its Responsible AI Advisory Board, and it's something I feel quite passionately about. So I quickly put in an application for that, and they told me I was one of 800 that's been chosen, so that feels like a privilege, and it's great. The lady Jenny Tennyson is chairing the Responsible AI Advisory Board, and she used to be on our board. She used to be the CEO of the Open Data Institute, and she used to be on our board many moons ago, not for very long because she had to step down because she was just so busy and she couldn't really make the time commitment. But it was great. It's great to be working with her again, and sort of opening my eyes to how much government is doing with AI, and how much the opportunity is to kind of improve citizens' experiences of interacting with government with AI, but also some of the challenges that are presented as well. And obviously there's a lot of skeptical people out there as well, so they don't want to suddenly be chatting to an AI chatbot rather than a person, which I can perfectly understand and completely agree with, but at the same time there are lots of opportunities for efficiencies as well.
Of course, yeah, particularly across public sector.
Yes.
As well, yes, okay. Brilliant, thank you, Mark. One last question then, and normally I say if there was somebody out there who fancied a career in leadership but didn't know where to go, what advice would you give them? But I suppose I'd broaden that for you, which is if there's somebody out there who has a social mission or a dream of a social mission they have, what advice would you give to them?
There's a lot of people who say if you're just determined enough, you'll find a way. And I do think that is right to an extent. But I think a lot of it comes down to, you've got to be able to articulate your idea in a way that people can understand, both from a social mission point of view, as in, why are you doing this, and what need are you addressing, and articulating that need. But then you've got to be able to have the financials and the basic business plan behind it, because you've got to be credible. I think, and I think that's, you've got to have that. If someone says, I really like this idea, how does it work? You've got to have that ready to go in with the details straight afterwards. And this is what I need to make this work. And then the other thing I would say is you've got to have the network that's going to unlock the funding for you, whether that's for-profit funding for social purpose, which is great, and I think there's or whether it's non-profit philanthropy basically. Out there as well, and it can be hard to build that network and find those funding opportunities. I would just, I don't think there's no pithy piece of advice you can give to that, other than there are organisations out there that can help you. You've just got to be willing to find them and find the people who can open the doors for you. And it's one conversation in the early days. I was like, every conversation, I sort of, my mental strategy was every useful conversation I have, at the end of it, right, who can you introduce me to now, who can you introduce me to? And ideally you come out of every meeting with 2 or 3 more introductions, and then you have to go and meet those people, and then they make more introductions, and eventually you will find the people that you need to find. But that's a lot of work and a lot of time commitment, and it's particularly hard if you've got to balance you've got a job and you've got to balance a job and other commitments as well. I was lucky; I sort of found myself in a job where I was given, I had quite a lot of time to go and build the network that I needed and open the doors that I needed to access the funding and get it off the ground. And it's not everybody gets to have that, but if you're committed enough, you find a way ultimately. But networks, the people are the people who ultimately make the difference.
Knocking on a lot of doors.
But I think it's not a barrier. I think the thing I'm keen to stress is it's not a barrier. Like I'm not saying I haven't been quite lucky in terms of the networks that I have access to, and undoubtedly that's the case. But I do believe you can build yourself a network. Anyone can build themselves a network quite quickly that can be very useful to you. But it takes a while, and it takes. You need to be deliberate about it.
Brilliant. It's been wonderful to hear your story today. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Thanks very much for having me.
And no problem at all. We look forward to the next journey for Ada and where it's going next.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Thank you for listening to Inspiring Working Lives, the Morgan Hunt podcast, driving positive change and helping you to grow your career. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring conversation. For more insights, opportunities, and updates, head to morganhunt.com.